Hi everybody, so we are going to continue on with our cell lecture and we're going to take a look at what is happening outside of cells. The first thing we're going to talk about is a cell wall, and this is going to be a non-living jacket that surrounds some types of cells. So animal cells don't have a cell wall. The probably most common ones that we're going to look at are plants and prokaryotes. They both have cell walls. And there's going to be two major categorizations of these cell walls. All plant cells have a primary cell wall, and then some will develop a secondary cell wall. And so here we're just looking at a diagram of a cell wall. And so here you can see it says primary cell wall, and so it's that thinner layer on the very outside. And then we have 3 layers of secondary wall. And then there's this area here and says middle lamella, and that is going to be the connection between cells 1 and 2. So the primary cell wall, all cells, plant cells have these. It's a thin and flexible wall, and you have cellulose fibers that are going to be aligned at right angles to the expansion of the cell. And the placement of these fibers is going to be guided by those microtubules that we talked about yesterday. So the cytoskeleton is helping with the placement of the fibers that make up a cell wall. And a secondary cell wall is a little bit different. It's going to be thicker and much more rigid. And this is actually found in the space between the cell membrane and the primary cell wall. And it might only cover part of a cell. And you know secondary cell walls because this is what makes up wood. So like the harder part of a tree or a tree branch, that's going to be there because there's secondary cell walls along some of those cells. I mentioned the little middle lamella already, and this is the thin layer. It's got lots of pectin, and it's found between adjacent plant cells, and it's sort of like the glue that's going to hold those cells together. So cell walls can be made of polysaccharides or silica, and they are really important for a cell's exoskeleton. They aid in support and protection. Support is going to be super important when we look at really large plants, like some really big trees. They need to have a way to support themselves against gravity. Cell walls are really important for that. Next, we're going to look at what is actually outside of our cells. So are our cells just like floating around in our bodies, or what's going on outside of the cells? And so we have something called an extracellular matrix, and it kind of looks like a fuzzy coat on animal cells, and it sort of serves the same function as the middle lamella does in plant cells. So this is what's going to help keep all your cells stuck together. And you're going to find a lot of glycoproteins and collagen. And so if you look at this word glycoproteins, again, you can break it apart. Obviously, we see the word protein. We also see glyco, which sounds like glucose, so it's going to be made of some type of carbohydrate and protein. And so we do have evidence that shows that this extracellular matrix is involved with cell behavior and cell communication. Later on in this unit, we'll talk a lot more about how the glycoproteins are really important in cell communication. So this is a diagram depicting the extracellular matrix. So down here is inside of a cell, so it's the cytoplasm, and you can see that you have the microfilaments from some of that cytoskeleton sort of supporting this cell membrane, helping to maintain the shape. So this is the phospholipid bilayer right here. You can tell because bilayer, 2 layers, and you've got 2 rows of these phospholipids. And these are some integral proteins. And then out here, everything that we're seeing on the top part in the blue, that is the extracellular matrix. So extracellular meaning outside of the cells. You can see we've got some collagen fibers here. The blue that you're seeing here, these are polysaccharide molecules. And so essentially this extracellular matrix is really important. It's making connections with the cells, and you can kind of see with this diagram and the polysaccharide molecules why people would say it kind of looks like a fuzzy coat. All right, so we're going to talk more now about how cells sort of work together when they're nearby and how they talk to each other. And we're going to do that by looking at what we call intercellular junctions, so meaning junctions between cells. In plants, we've got something called the plasmodesmata. And so here we've got some cell walls, and you can see the cell wall is the white part, and then on either side of that you've got interiors of two different cells. And so this kind of darker line in the middle is where the cells are meeting, so that would be your middle lamella. And if you can see, there are some channels running between the top and the bottom cell. And so those are going to be your plasmodesmata. And those are channels between the cells through adjacent cell walls. So it allows for communication between the two cells. We know that plant cells have these, the middle lamella, these more rigid cell walls, and they're not going to be able to move around as much like some animal cells. And so they need to have a way to talk to each other, and this is what the plasmodesmata are for. So it allows communication between cells. Unfortunately, though, it also allows things like viruses to travel quickly between cells because it's literally like a channel between the two. In animals, we've got tight junctions, desmosomes, and gap junctions that we're going to take a look at. So this is just kind of a breakdown. Here we've got a tight junction between two cells. Here we've got some intermediate filaments of desmosomes, and so we are going to kind of take a look at each of these individually. So with tight junctions, this is a very tight fusion of the membranes of two cells that are next to each other, and it's actually going to seal off the area between the cells. And so what that does is it prevents materials from moving around the cells because it's sealed off. And so you can see that here we've got some sealed areas between these cells, so materials wouldn't really be able to move through that area because it is completely sealed. With desmosomes, these are bundles of filaments that anchor junctions between cells. It does not close the area off, but it keeps the cells connected. And so this has to do with coordination of movement between groups of cells. So they're all connected, but not completely sealed. And so you can see that here. So there is still this extracellular space, so materials could move between cells. However, we do have the area where we've got these intracellular filaments binding the cells together. So it's a little bit different than the tight junctions. Next, we've got gap junctions, and these are open channels between cells. This is very similar to the plasmodesmata that we saw in plant cells, and again, it's going to allow for communication between cells. And so the reason that it allows for communication so well is because it's actually open channels between cells so that materials can move back and forth. Alright, so that's it for this lecture, and for this chapter actually. So we're done with chapter 6 now, and things that you should be able to do. You need to be able to identify cellular parts by their structure, but also by their function. So we want to understand what these different parts of cells actually look like and be able to explain how structure and function go together. And your lecture question for today, what are the pros and cons of these intercellular junctions that we just talked about? I would like you guys to include an explanation for each of your pros and cons that you give me. Alright, so send me an email with an answer to that, and I will see you guys later. Have a good one.